Good morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, legal twists in the fallout from the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. The Justice Department now says some of the documents recovered at former President Trump's home potentially contain attorney-client privileged information. What that means for the DOJ's investigation and the growing national security concerns over the documents. Urgent mission. Right now, a team of scientists is on the ground in Ukraine, hoping to prevent a disaster at a nuclear plant currently under Russian control. The latest on their visit is fears over the potential for a radiation leak grow. Plus, Ukrainians launch a counteroffensive attack against Russia. We are on the ground in Ukraine this morning. On hold, NASA scrubbed its attempt to send an unmanned rocket to the moon. From engine problems to weather, the issues plaguing the mission. And this morning, the race to get those problems fixed as the clock ticks down to the next launch date. Plus, her story on air. For the first time in the U.S., 3 black women are the main anchors at a local TV station, the first of its kind news team, now reflecting the community they report on every day.
To see a whole newscast where the people who look exactly like me, I don't think my younger self ever pictured it happening.
How they're flipping the script and opening the doors for more representation on TV. A lot of folks are starting the day with them. We're grateful you're starting the day with us. And we begin this morning with the latest on the search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Lawyers for the Justice Department said yesterday that some of the documents the FBI recovered during their search may contain information that's protected by attorney-client privileges. That disclosure by the DOJ was sent to U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon. She's currently weighing a request from Trump's legal team to have what's called a special master appointed to review the documents that were seized by the DOJ. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now for more on this. So, Julia, how could this disclosure by the DOJ impact the judge's decision on whether to appoint a special master?
Well, she may decide, Joe, that, in fact, this isn't a decision she needs to make, that, in fact, the point is moot because the filter team at the FBI has already completed their job of going through these documents and deciding what might be protected under attorney-client privilege, what needs to be handed over to the National Archives, and what maybe should have been classified that was not kept in the correct location. And so maybe the job is already done, and so why appoint someone else to do that? So we should be able to get more of a window into that today, and also to see the arguments from the Trump team about why they think someone might still be necessary. Perhaps they think you should have someone go in after them. I guess you would have to be collecting all of this work again and going through it. We know it took them the better part of August just to get through all of these documents. To start that process over would seem a little tedious, but we'll get more insight into that today. But it may be that the time to appoint a special master would have been weeks ago, and that simply this isn't even a decision she would need to make anymore.
Julia, can you walk us through how a review like this works and how the DOJ determines what might be privileged information and what might be important to their national security investigation?
That's right. They have a filter team. This is largely career agents at the FBI, not people who are appointed to serve under any one administration. You could very well have some of these people going through these documents that actually came in under the Trump administration, and they're going through and deciding what might be attorney-client privilege and maybe what should be actually set aside. In other words, not looked at as part of this case. That would be protected under attorney-client privilege. Perhaps it's something personal. And note that the former president wrote down that doesn't necessarily need to be preserved, doesn't need to go over to the National Archives under the Presidential Records Act, and actually can just be sent back to the former president himself, saying that it would be his property. It seems that Trump did not do a good job of sorting through documents, keeping them where they needed to go. So it's a lot like just going through any pile of papers you might find on my desk or your desk, Joe. Maybe you're more organized than I am, and trying to figure out what folder they need to go in. It's so all mishmashed together. That's the job of a filter team. Often it can take months, but in this case, we know because it was so high profile, they were able to put a lot of people on a team like this so that the job can be done in a matter of weeks. And, we're looking looking at 11 sets here. We're not sure exactly how many documents they have. We can imagine the work was cumbersome and it took a long time to do just to figure out what actually needed to be preserved.
Hopefully no one has to go through either of our desks, Julia. That's I definitely know that would be a good thing on my part. Real quickly, Julia, now that what happens, that the DOJ sent out these documents to the judge for review ahead of Thursday's ruling about that special master.
Yeah, that's right. So now we'll be able to see on Thursday, when we actually have a ruling on this, whether or not the judge still thinks that it's necessary to have a special master and to restart this process again. It could be very well that the judge says, look, this job has already been done. And you have to remember that the filter team is not deciding what might be criminal. They're just deciding what needs to be kept and where it needs to go. And so that decision will still be left to prosecutors if they do indeed decide to present a case and pursue charges based on what they find here. So it's still more work to be done. It's not as if everything falls on this filter team, and it could very well be that a special master would no longer be necessary. But this week we'll see how that plays out in court.
It seems like we do every week. Wait and see how it plays out in court. Julia Ainsley, thanks so much. Appreciate it. In Georgia, a judge says Governor Brian Kemp must testify before a grand jury that's looking into potential election interference allegedly organized by former President Trump and his allies. Kemp was trying to avoid testifying. The judge did rule that Kemp can wait until after this November's race for governor, noting the close proximity between now and Election Day. Kemp came under fire by Trump in the days and weeks following the 2020 election after the Georgia governor refused Trump's demands to overturn the results of the election. This morning, Ukraine's military says it has begun a counteroffensive to retake Russian-held territory in the south. The apparent start of the counterattack comes after weeks of buildup and nearly 6 months since Russian forces seized the southern Kherson region in the early days of the war. Meanwhile, a team from the International Atomic Energy Agency has arrived in Kyiv. They're visiting the Zaporzhzhia nuclear power plant, which is currently under Russian control. The agency says the team will determine if the nuclear plant is able to operate safely. For more on all this, we are joined by NBC News correspondent Josh Lederman, who's in central Ukraine. Josh, let's start with this trip by the UN's nuclear watchdog. What are they hoping to achieve, and how long are they actually expected to be at the plants?
Well, Joe, once they get to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, those IAEA inspectors are expected to spend several days on site. But this morning, an advisor to President Zelensky says that Russia has been shelling the route that those inspectors would take from Kyiv into Zaporizhzhia in order to try to force them to instead go through Russian-occupied territory to get there. So that's kind of the latest wrinkle as they try to get this visit underway. But once they do successfully get to the power plant, they're expected to try to identify what damage has already been done to the plant by shelling over the last several months, and also assess whether some of the backup systems, the safety mechanisms at the plant are still intact, and also to try to get a sense of what conditions those Ukrainian workers at the plant are working under. Some of them have reported being tortured, but there's obviously a lot they're not going to be able to do, such as stop the shelling at the plant or force Russia to hand back control of the plant to Ukraine.
So, Josh, let's talk about that counteroffensive by Ukraine in the south. Do we know how that attack is progressing? What's the latest there?
Well, over the last 24 hours or so, Joe, we've seen significant fighting in the area of Kherson, where this counteroffensive is taking place, the first city to fall to Russia in the war, with Ukraine's military saying this morning that they were able to destroy about 30 Russian military assets, including an S-300 anti-aircraft system. The Russians saying that as they repelled the Ukrainians, they killed several hundred of them. Neither of those claims can be verified, but clearly the fight is moving toward the south. Something that Ukraine has been signaling for weeks. The Russians, in response, have been pouring troops into the south in anticipation of this. And so both sides really have built up their militaries, now expected to have the fighting really intensifying as Ukraine tries to start pushing the Russians out of territory they seized earlier in this war. President Zelensky saying last night that if Russians who are currently in Kherson want to survive, it's time that they go home right now.
Strong words there from the Ukraine president. Josh Lederman, thank you so much. Back at home, President Biden will deliver a primetime speech in Philadelphia on Thursday. It's being billed as a speech about the, quote, soul of the nation. The president is expected to talk about how America's rights and freedoms are still under attack. It's a return to the core message of his 2020 campaign as Americans get ready to vote in November's midterms. NBC News White House reporter Lauren Egan joins us now with more. So first of all, Lauren, what more can you tell us about this week's speech? Do we know what the president's expected to say?
We expect him to pick up on a lot of the same themes that he ran on in his 2020 presidential campaign. We know that he's going to say that America's reputation on the world stage is still on the line. He's going to say our credibility with our foreign allies is on the ballot this November. And he's going to say that American democracy, importantly, is still something that he is fighting for. Last week, the president gave a speech at a Democratic fundraiser, and he sort of previewed what I think we can also expect to hear from him on Thursday. He really went after what he's calling MAGA Republicans. He compared that stream of Republicans to being semi-fascist. So we expect him to really make a clear difference between Democrats, Republicans. He's going to paint those Republicans as anti-democratic and make very clear for the American people that that is what he views as the choice this November in those midterm elections.
So Philadelphia, clearly a city with a lot of history. Why give the address in Philadelphia, and why now?
Well, we know Pennsylvania as a state is very important to the president. He was born there. Philly is where he launched his presidential campaign. And as you mentioned, there's just a lot. It's dripping in symbolism. It's where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were debated. And importantly, it's also home to a very competitive Senate race and a governor's race. So the state might be able to decide who is going to control the Senate in November. As for why right now? Thursday is September 1st, and that's usually kind of marks the time where most Americans start to tune into the midterms for the first time. So this speech on Thursday is really going to set the tone for the president as we head into the midterms and what he views as his midterm message.
And you mentioned how important Pennsylvania is. We know this is actually going to be the president's third event in Pennsylvania just this week. Today, he's there to talk about his Safer America plan on gun crime. Quickly, what can you tell us about that?
That's right. He's going to tout the bipartisan bill that was passed earlier this year. And he's also going to try to address an issue that Democrats historically have been vulnerable on, and that's crime. We know that he's going to talk about January 6th, and he's going to say how important a role law enforcement played there. Again, trying to sort of back Republicans into a corner there from their position on January 6th. And he's still going to go after some Republicans and say that they have not done enough on gun control and did not go far enough in some of the bills that he was pushing for. So that's something we expect to hear from him today, and we'll be watching out for that.
All right, Lauren Egan, thank you so much. This morning, NASA engineers are working to fix a problem that delayed yesterday's launch of the Artemis 1 mission. It is a high-stakes moment for the space agency, which will spend $90 billion on the Artemis program through 2025, with the goal of establishing a base on the moon. But first, NASA needs to test the rocket and capsule that will eventually take astronauts, including the first woman and person of color, to the moon's surface, nearly 50 years after the Apollo missions. Joining us now is Lori Garver, NASA's former deputy administrator and author of Escaping Gravity, My Quest to Transform NASA and Launch a New Space Age. So good to have you with us, Lori. Thanks for joining us. Give us a sense of what you think is going on right now at Kennedy Space Center, and how concerning are these tech problems?
Well, the team was exhausted yesterday, so I'm sure they're getting back to work this morning to determine whether they can fix what happened enough to do another launch attempt on Friday. This is a really important mission because NASA has been at it for 12 years. It has cost $43 billion, and NASA in a way feels, I think, that it's competing with the private sector, who has been successfully launching astronauts these last couple of years in SpaceX. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I hope they're not feeling that way, because in our nation, you know, the government drives technology, and the private sector should be partnering with them. The private sector has really gotten out ahead of NASA in the launch arena, and I think these delays are embarrassing for the agency.
I mean, let's talk more about that. Artemis is already years behind schedule. It's far more expensive than originally thought, and unlike SpaceX, which you mentioned, or Blue Origin rockets, NASA's space launch system isn't reusable. So what makes this return to the moon so important? And in your mind, is it worth it?
Well, I think returning to the moon is a wonderful thing, a good goal, but doing so with this old technology at such a cost is problematic. I think that ultimately, when we left the moon 50 years ago, we thought going back would happen sooner, but if it hadn't, we certainly would have thought we would be doing it with new technology and with reusability and a lower cost so that exploration would be sustained. You know, NASA uses the words sustainable, and we're going on the moon to then learn how to go to Mars. But in actuality, these are reused shuttle parts, and they aren't working so well.
All right, Lori Garver, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your perspective and your expertise on this one. Turning now to a growing water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, where the situation is so bad the governor is now declaring a state of emergency. The city has been under a water boil order for 4 weeks after it was hit by severe storms that caused extreme flooding. And now pumps at the city's main water treatment facility have failed. That's leaving people without enough water to flush toilets or fight fire.
We began preparing for a scenario where Jackson would be without running water for an extended period. Over the weekend, we started developing water distribution plans, sourcing tankers, and assessing all of the risk associated with an event like this. All of this was with the prayer that we would have more time before their system ran to failure. Unfortunately, that failure appears to have begun. As we speak, we are drafting a state of emergency declaration with regards to Jackson's failure to produce running water.
Now, the mayor of Jackson says that the public schools will shift from in-person learning to virtual today. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has more on the difficult challenges people there are facing.
In Jackson, Mississippi, school drop-off isn't just for the kids. It's also for the water. The entire city is facing a boil water notice, again.
We're told, don't wash your hair with the water, don't brush your teeth with the water.
Lakeisha Galilan worries about her 8-year-old.
Is she going to walk over to a water fountain and drink from that water fountain?
To be safe, signs are up at the middle school. They've been there a long time.
You can't remember a time when the kids could use the water fountains in the school?
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember.
George Stewart has taught here for 6 years, a predominantly black, low-income school. On top of all the other challenges, water quality and water pressure are a constant battle.
At one point, we had to shut down for about 2 weeks.
When?
This was maybe a year or two ago.
In the middle of the pandemic?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Class went virtual. Kids fell further behind.
We have many students who consider some of our most vulnerable students who virtual learning does not help them at all.
The problem here, like so many other places, is failing infrastructure.
This is one of 2 water treatment facilities in Jackson, and the one largely to blame for the most recent citywide boil water notice. And officials still can't tell people when the water will be safe to drink again.
In 2020, an EPA report cited a long list of problems with the water system, including failure to replace lead pipes, faulty monitoring equipment, inadequate staffing.
There's been a failure to recognize this as a unified problem, as a problem both on the state and even at times the federal level, understanding that we lived in an aging America.
Shokwe Antar Lumumba is Jackson's mayor.
If I could write you a check right now to fix the problem, how big would that check have to be?
For the water system alone, it would have to be in excess of more than $200 million.
Pastor C.J. Rhodes, father of twins, has watched many in Jackson lose faith in their leaders.
I don't think our congregation is the only one that feels that way. You talk to people all across the city. Many are livid. Many want to vote people out.
Not far from the surface, concerns that racial inequities could be to blame.
I am concerned about my city filled with residents that look like me. I think this is an opportunity to change the narrative of what Mississippi is known for.
And that can start, he says, by providing the most basic of needs, water. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Jackson, Mississippi.
Let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Great to see you. And we had a stormy day yesterday. So many spots in the Midwest to the Southern Plains saw some storms. We saw wind reports, 228 wind reports. We saw some hail as well. And we saw some flash flooding. Lots of people this morning without power. And we're going to see the chance for more severe weather as we go throughout the day. So this is what we saw in terms of those storm reports. Again, the wind, that was the biggest concern. The Storm Prediction Center doing so well with their forecast yesterday. We're going to see more wind today with winds gusting over 60 miles per hour. More downpours as well. We're seeing them at this hour. Again, where you see those darker colors, the brighter colors, the yellows, the reds, the oranges, in portions of the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, into portions of the Southern Plains, specifically through Texas. We're looking at some very heavy rain right now. This could lead to flash flooding in spots, especially in New Mexico and also in Texas. But it's the Northeast that we're watching a cold front move through. It's moving through really warm, humid air, and that's going to bring us a chance for some strong to severe storms. And they could come at the worst time at our evening commute. So Philly, Baltimore, D.C. could see some of those stronger storms, but we are seeing those heavy downpours right now. Most of those storms just rain. We're not seeing any severe weather this morning. So there's that cold front. It's a long stretching one from portions of New England down through the Southern Plains, and we will see storms firing along this front, so Atlanta to Boston, and then heavy downpours once again in the Gulf Coast communities. Not great news with all that rain that we saw the past week and a half. It's already so saturated. Any additional rain could cause some flooding. Tomorrow we'll see the Northeast drying out by lunchtime, and then more storms erupting across the South, especially in Texas and along the Gulf Coast states. Your severe threat for today, winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. That could certainly cause some damage on its own, bringing down some tree limbs, some power lines. Could see some hail, could see a quick tornado, a quick spin up, but that chance is low. So Burlington to Scranton State College, Philadelphia, D.C., also Baltimore, you could see some stronger storms. We're concerned about the forecast, too, in terms of the rainfall, especially in New England, interior portions of the Northeast, where we're seeing some heavy rain, the potential for in portions of upstate New York. So 1, 2, 3 inches of rain. A flood threat today for 1 million people in portions of New Mexico, also Texas. We do have a flash flood warning this morning. That's where you see the little red box in portions of southern Texas. And we'll end it here because we're looking at a really warm day, Joe, in the west. We're starting another heat wave. We're looking at temperatures into the 90s and also triple digits. Back to you.
Another scorcher. All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Coming up on Morning News Now, it has now been 1 year since the U.S. completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan, the move changing the landscape of the country. Where Afghanistan stands today when it comes to human rights and U.S. relations. We'll take a closer look next. Welcome back. Today marks 1 year since U.S. armed forces completed their withdrawal from Afghanistan. As the Taliban seized control of the country, chaotic and deadly scenes unfolded at the airport. We all remember these images, thousands rushing to get on the last flights out of the country. For more now, we are joined by NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. Colonel, thanks as always for joining us. I mean, 1 year since that last flight left. How do you reflect right now on this U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Well, from a military standpoint, it was something of a disaster. We'd already planned to leave, and we had plans to leave from Bagram Air Base, but we gave it back sometime before we made the decision to actually pull out, leaving us only the airfield inside Kabul in a very restricted and overpopulated area from which to leave. That made evacuation extremely difficult, and the chaotic scenes that you see resulted from that. I think perhaps the biggest lesson from a military standpoint is that, first of all, if you're going to evacuate, you got to hold to the plan that you've already created to go from the most convenient airport and not something that's like the airport we left, Karzai Airport in the middle of Kabul. The second thing is that you have to continuously upgrade your plans as the situation changes, and most people are not convinced that the military did that. And as a result, we lost the people that we did in the maelstrom of violence that took place around the airfield. We were always going to leave. The question is how we were going to leave. And in the end, we chose the least efficient and most violent way to leave, which didn't work out very well for anybody, Joe.
Let's look at where things are right now. The humanitarian situation in Afghanistan has really deteriorated over the last year. Many are living in extreme poverty. Women's rights have also taken a giant leap backwards. I mean, if you compare where things are now with where they were more than 20 years ago, are they the same? Are they worse? How do you compare?
Well, they haven't changed very much, and you have to focus on the fact that Afghanistan itself hasn't changed a great deal in hundreds and hundreds of years. We had a theocracy back then. We've got a theocracy now. Afghanistan is terribly corrupt. The West has delivered something on the order of $750 million in humanitarian aid as of just a month or so ago. And there's no confidence that the majority of it has gone to assist the people of Afghanistan. A lot of it gets siphoned off by the government in Kabul, and the rest of it, well, not the rest of it, but a significant percentage of the rest of it gets siphoned off as it goes down the chain to get to the people. Most of the country is rural and poor, and it's going to stay that way, Joe.
Quite recently, we know a U.S. strike in Afghanistan killed the top al-Qaeda leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri. He was one of the key architects behind 9/11. The Taliban insisted they didn't know that he was living in the capital. In your mind, where do American-Afghan relations stand right now, and how do they look going forward?
Well, first of all, he was living in the middle of Afghanistan, of Kabul, in the most affluent area around, surrounded by people who were in the government. And so it's impossible to believe the assertions of the Taliban government that, in fact, they didn't know that he was there. The second thing that's important is to recognize that in the agreement that the United States made with Afghanistan before we left, the government in Kabul was going to ensure that people like al-Zawahiri did not move into Afghanistan. There's no way that we can believe anything that the government says from now on in. Our interests are represented by an office in Kabul from which we make decisions on how to distribute aid principally. We continue to try to convince the Taliban that they ought to adhere to the kinds of democratic principles to which we adhere, but not only is there no guarantee, we have some degree of confidence it'll never happen. So a year after we've left, not a great deal has changed from decades, if not centuries ago, Joe.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, always appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Joe.
Staying with the international news, the United Nations is calling for emergency assistance for Pakistan after devastating floods have killed more than 1,000 people and caused roughly $10 billion in damage. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now with more on that and other world headlines. Molly, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. That's right. We are starting in Pakistan, where an estimated 1/3 of the country is now underwater. More than 1,100 people have died since monsoon season began in June, and the government blames climate change for the heaviest rain they've had in a decade. Now, moving on to China, Joe, an update on a shocking story. Chinese authorities said they have charged 28 people, and they're now investigating 15 officials for corruption more than 2 months after a group of men assaulted 4 women at a restaurant. The women refused the men's advances, and the violent attack was caught on CCTV. It went viral, sparking renewed debate about gender-based violence in China. And finally, taking you to Portugal, a little Jurassic Park, paleontologists have unearthed the largest dinosaur remains ever discovered in Europe in a man's backyard. The massive skeletal remains are believed to be a Brachiosaurus sauropod. I hope that I got that right. If confirmed, Joe, that means the dinosaur had 4 legs, had an extremely long neck, and get this, roamed the earth for 140 million years. Joe, I'll send it back to you.
All right, imagine having someone find that in your backyard. My goodness. All right, Molly, thank you so much. Coming up, in her own words, Britney Spears breaks her silence in an audio recording detailing allegations of abuse she says she suffered during her conservatorship. What she said in the now deleted clip and how her father is responding. Plus, dangers of doom scrolling, how surrounding yourself with endless negative news can have a long-term impact on your health. We're back with new developments in the Britney Spears conservatorship saga. The pop star took to YouTube to give her side of the story and says she still hasn't even shared half of it. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer has more on the bombshell claim she's making against her own family.
The princess of pop is back online.
Ooh, these expensive, these is red bottoms.
There's obviously such high interest across the globe in Britney's case that each and every little minute detail that comes out really captivates Britney's fandom.
Britney Spears deleting her Instagram and taking to Twitter, posting a link to a YouTube audio file that included this.
I felt like I was in a state of shock, almost like when an old person feels helpless and they're literally going through some sort of shock treatment and they can't relax their body because they don't have the answers of why they can't have their own keys to their car and put it in the ignition and walk outside, and their own security guards at every door saying they can't go. Sitting down, drawing 6 galls of blood every week. Weak as hell.
The voice memo released during Sunday night's Video Music Awards details more allegations of abuse she suffered during her conservatorship. NBC News has been unable to confirm the authenticity of the rest of the 22-minute video. But after it was made private, Spears added a follow-up tweet, a reminder to some of you who may have gotten what I said confused. It was 6 small vials of blood, not 6 gallons.
She's clearly healing. And the only way that she knows how to heal is in public. She has led a very public life, and throughout her conservatorship, she has expressed that she felt silenced.
That 13-year conservatorship coming to an end late last year after a judge ruled an end to the court-mandated control of Britney Spears' personal and financial life. Representatives for her father, Jamie Spears, did not respond to our request for comment, but they've repeatedly denied allegations of abuse and said he has only acted in his daughter's best interest. Lynn Spears reacting on Instagram after the audio was posted, writing, quote, "Britney, your whole life I have tried my best to support your dreams and wishes, and also I have tried my best to help you out of hardships. I have never and will never turn my back on you. Your rejections to the countless times I have flown out in calls have made me feel hopeless. I have tried everything. I love you so much, but this talk is for you and me only, eye to eye, in private." The post coming just a few days after Britney dropped a new track with Elton John called Hold Me Closer. A fresh spin to the hit song Tiny Dancer.
It has topped the charts around the world within minutes of the song launching.
The single marks the first music to come from Britney Spears since her conservatorship ended. Spears tweeting, "I'm kind of overwhelmed. It's a big deal to me." Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
Time now for our weekly mental health check-in. This morning, a new hotline aimed at helping farmers, a group of workers whose problems are not always well understood. Plus, a new study that gives us even more reasons to stop the habit of so-called doom scrolling. Dr. Soumya Dave, psychiatrist and author of What a Happy Family, joins us now. Dr. Dave, good to have you with us. Let's start with this new helpline for farmers and ranchers. It comes amid renewed focus on mental health resources following the rollout of the federal crisis number 988. What more can you tell us about this?
Sure. So what we do know is that access is such a big barrier for people seeking mental health support. And for people who are members of the agricultural community, they're facing different challenges that are out of their control, whether that's the weather, the market, so many different factors. And so while we do have that 988 suicide lifeline number that we've talked about here on this segment before, we also know that it is so important and so helpful for people to speak with someone who really understands their challenges. And the Agri-Stress Line is equipped with staff members who understand the nuances of what farmers and ranchers may be going through. So I think this is just such a promising step in the right direction. And it's an opportunity for people to get tailored support that they deserve on the ground.
All right, let's turn now to that new study out of Texas about the news. Researchers say obsessing over negative news can affect your health. We often call it doom scrolling. It's also why we try to give you positive news here on Morning News Now. But let's talk about this. When does keeping up with what's going on become doom scrolling, and what kind of negative health impacts can that have?
Sure. So this study done at Texas Tech found that actually people who were unable to stop scrolling, so they felt the word was obsessive about how much media they were taking in. Over half of those people, so 61% of the people in this study, felt physically ill. So they felt symptoms in all systems of their body. Now, we've actually talked in this segment before about how our brains and our bodies aren't designed to keep taking in stressful information around the clock. And it can affect everything from our mood to our digestive tracts to muscle aches to really everything. And so what I recommend is taking breaks as often as possible, whether that's in the form of turning off alerts and notifications for periods of the day, or if we're feeling really daring, taking a phone fast, which involves putting away our devices for hours at a time and really checking in with ourselves and asking how we're feeling about our scrolling.
Such good advice. Hard to do, but very, very important. All right, when we talk about what we're taking in, it's not just the news, it's also literally what we eat. And finally, there's a study that suggests consuming ultra-processed foods doesn't just affect our physical health, but it can also have a negative impact on mental health. Tell us more about this study's findings.
Sure. So what this study found was that people who reported eating more ultra-processed foods, so when I say that, I mean foods that are derived of substances that can be in foods, but really have very little whole foods. So substances like sugars, fats, certain oils, flavorings, colorings, things like that. So people who reported having more of these types of foods also were more likely to report symptoms of mild depression. Now, this is something that continues to be researched, but we've also had studies that have shown that eating more whole foods leads to fewer symptoms of depression. So we know that what we take in affects us. And for anybody looking for guidance on where to go from here, I think sometimes taking something out can feel overwhelming. So if we can add one more whole food in with every meal, that might be a place to start.
That's good. A good little trade-off there, and it helps us physically and mentally. Dr. Soumya Dave, good to have you on. Thank you so much. And if you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. Again, that number, 988. Coming up, a royal bombshell. Meghan Markle talks about what life was like in the royal family and the strained relationship between Prince Harry and his father, Prince Charles. Next, more of her new interview just a day before the 25th anniversary of Princess Diana's death. We're back now with that bombshell Meghan Markle interview with New York Magazine's The Cut. The article is already drawing some criticism for its release just a couple days before the 25th anniversary of Princess Diana's death. The interview is, in a way, an introduction to the Duchess of Sussex and Prince Harry's next chapter. She addresses the past, the present, and the future in her attempt to reclaim her narrative in the wake of her tense relationship with the UK press. Now she's ready for her own next act. That's the large text at the top of Meghan Markle's new interview with New York Magazine's The Cut. She's once again generating headlines with frank comments about the royal family and the reason she and Harry stepped back from royal duties. The article comes just before the 25th anniversary of Princess Diana's death on Wednesday.
It's come out in all the newspapers this morning. Of course, a lot of attention is being put on Diana's legacy, 25 years on. So I think some people are puzzled by the timing.
Headlines in England quick to slam the interview and Markle. The Cut article starts off with the line, "The conditions are right for confession." And confess Meghan Markle did, including her family's lack of autonomy while under royal rule. Markle shares she was required to release photos of her son Archie to the Royal Rota, the UK media pool, before she could post them herself. She says, quote, "Why would I give the very people that are calling my children the N-word a photo of my child before I can share it with the people that love my child?" Markle also discussing family struggles, including her own rift with her father, telling the magazine, "Harry said to me, I lost my dad in this process." Her allies later clarifying that Harry was discussing Meghan's dad, Thomas Markle, though he has spoken out about his strained relationship with Prince Charles.
You just said that your dad stopped taking your calls. Why did he stop taking your calls?
Because I
took matters, and by that point, I took matters into my own hands.
Meghan added this week, it doesn't have to be the same for them as it was for me. But that's his decision. Meghan and Harry have both said they left England seeking a more private life.
Everyone has a basic right to privacy.
But with the attention-grabbing new interview and regular new podcast episodes from that reported $25 million deal with Spotify, the Sussexes are making it clear they want to control their own story. Meghan Markle also revealed that she might come back to Instagram, something she had to give up, she says, when she married Prince Harry. We reached out to the palace about the interview with The Cut. They had no comment. The second episode of Markle's podcast, Archetypes, drops today with guest Mariah Carey. Now to a special honor for an American hero thousands of miles from home. A World War II pilot fought and died in eastern France during World War II. Now his family is learning just how much he impacted lives in his time there. NBC News Now anchor Aaron Gilchrist shows us how one town is paying tribute.
A soaring show of air power from the French Air Force above. And below, a small town rolled out a welcome teeming with patriotism, all to honor an American hero who died helping bring freedom to France near the end of World War II.
It's extraordinary. I mean, I can't come up with enough words for this. It's unbelievable.
Chelsea Gray flew all the way from Wyoming to the French town of Longueville-en-Barrois for a special tribute to her great-uncle and to discover a piece of her family history.
There are people who feel like they wouldn't be here had it not been for...
Without my great-uncle. Yeah.
Lieutenant John Gilmore Jr. was an Army fighter pilot during World War II. As his team took out a German supply convoy, he was shot down by anti-aircraft artillery over this town.
It was a Mustang, a bombardier fighter, right. And his pilot was John Gilmore.
Jean-Luc Lauzilier is a local journalist and historian who's written for years about Gilmore's story and that of his friend Bernard Houtarde.
He saw the plane coming, and he thinks the pilot saw him also. And the pilot, the plane was burning. He avoids the house and crashes in the park.
Lieutenant Gilmore's plane crashed right here. As it sat on this spot smoldering, German soldiers were working their way to the crash site. A local woman was able to get here first. At 95 now, Houtarde's health kept him from this special gathering, but his granddaughter came in his place to share his family's story.
My great-grandmother was a nurse, and out of instinct, she ran to try and rescue the pilot, hoping she could save him. She had the reflex to take the bracelet. She wanted to stop the Germans from stealing it and hoped one day she could return it.
That bracelet had been hidden away until just a few years ago, quietly passed along to Houtarde, chiseled with Gilmore's name and the words "Forever Nancy."
He didn't know what to do with it and kept it until now. He decided he wanted to do some research, find Gilmore's family, and finally give it back.
We have a couple people on my team who are personally very passionate about World War history and genealogy in particular, and so we started searching.
Dara Paradiso is the U.S. Consul General in the region. Her office found Gilmore's family.
Someone on my team actually had a personal connection to someone who might have been a member of the family, having grown up in the same area. They reached out, and it turned out that indeed this was the great niece of the pilot.
For Houtarde's hometown, that bracelet has come to mean so much. This special ceremony, 78 years to the day after Gilmore died. This small village awash in red, white, and blue, honoring him and other soldiers who helped to ultimately liberate Longueville-en-Barrois.
And accompanied as well by Mrs. Gray and Mrs. Murphy.
That bracelet is also the reason for Chelsea's trip with her mom and son, a mission to thank the French for safeguarding her family's legacy and to receive not just a relic. They will also go home with an invaluable piece of their great-uncle's identity.
I think it's just a connection to the past and knowing that my mother's uncle and my great-uncle and my grandmother's brother had such an impact on this town.
And a fuller picture of the selfless act that cost him his life but saved so many others.
You come here and you see that they're so incredibly grateful, and I want to capture as much of that as I can and bottle it up and take it home, and then share it with as many people as I can.
Our thanks to Aaron Gilchrist for that report. Well, we don't know who the Nancy on that bracelet refers to. Chelsea says her next mission is to figure out who Nancy is and maybe find her family, too. Coming up, a first-of-its-kind news team, 3 black women, and now they are the main anchors at a local news station in Texas. How they're flipping the script in their industry. Next. After her impressive win at the U.S. Open last night, Serena Williams is now getting ready to team up with her sister Venus for their first round of doubles since 2018. But the doubles everyone is talking about this morning is the twinning she did with her daughter. 4-year-old Olympia stole the show wearing an outfit that matched her mom's, a black Nike dress bedazzled with rhinestones. Little Olympia even sported hair beads similar to the ones Serena wore when she won her first U.S. Open in 1999. Well, that is just plain adorable right there. Now to our series, Flipping the Script, featuring people on screen, on stage, and behind the scenes working to shine a spotlight on diversity. Enter the ladies of Texas Today, Jasmine Caldwell, Tahisha Moyes, and Ashley Carter. They made history this year by becoming the first all-woman, all-black news team in America. The trio host a popular morning newscast at our NBC affiliate KCEN in the Waco area. And they told me, well, they didn't see many people who looked like them on the news when they were growing up. They hope their success will inspire the next generation of young journalists. There are a lot of news shows out there right now. What do viewers who tune into your show get?
I think they get news with a side of sass.
Can you imagine, like, if we all just sat up here and bathed
I would have to say something. We're going to use deodorant.
We'll tell you what you need to know.
First up, breaking news from Temple, where all lanes of West Adams are shut down.
And then we'll tell you the tea on some things that we know.
When I do get snow cones, I always have to make sure I get, like, light colors, like clear, because if I get blue or red,
stains the mouth.
3 different personalities, but we mesh so well together. And, you know, once we are off the desk, we still are friends, and it comes across on the desk. What am I chewing?
There's like a white chocolate.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
chips in there. That's what it tastes like, I think.
Like, I chewed something. Is that supposed to be in here?
Wait a second. Let me inspect this a little further.
How are you flipping the script?
Meteorology is a really male-dominated field, and then you see even less of black women or people of color who are meteorologists. So just coming to work every day, that's how I'm flipping it.
For me, flipping the script is coming to work as my most authentic self. For me, that's wearing my natural hair, my curls out, or today, wearing my braids.
I'm flipping the script by daring to be different, staying true to myself, and just being an all-around stellar news anchor. Your time right now, 6:04, now time for the Morning Rush.
Tahisha, why is it what you're doing so important?
I think it's important because we are now starting to reflect the community that we give the news to every day. And for so many years, that just wasn't the case.
Welcome back, everyone. Texans, we have a new Bluebell flavor you're going to want to try.
Do you hear from the community, and what do you hear from the community?
Well, I went to a banquet this weekend, and there was this woman who told me, she said, I just love watching you and Ashley and Tahisha every morning. Like, sometimes I'm not even listening to the news. I just want to see your faces, and I have my daughter watch you as we're preparing, you know, to get ready for the school or for the work day. Another example, me and Ashley were in Walmart on Friday, and we were checking out, and they wanted to take photos, so we had to, you know, stop what we were doing with our bags in hands and take photos with some of the Walmart employees there. So it's great.
Well, you wear your slippers. I don't know if I'm outing you.
Yeah, I do.
You wear your slippers, so I feel like Crocs would be. Look at that. Your slippers and her AKA socks.
When you hear those reactions, what does that mean to you?
The weight of knowing that we are role models for so many people and a dream come true for so many others. It makes waking up every morning that much more important. It makes the job so much worth it.
Ashley and Jasmine are both part of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, which boasts a number of famous pledges, including Vice President Kamala Harris.
The sorority has been so supportive. I'm a part of the local chapter here, and they brag on me and Ashley all the time.
And the thing about AKA is they love to brag. So,
yes. So yeah, very supportive. They got Kamala, and now they got us.
Right. just beneath Kamala. That's what we I love it. Yeah, you always hear people say like you want to be the first, but you don't want to be the last. I'm hoping that now bosses in different markets and news stations are saying we don't have to do this cookie cutter way of news where you have to have a man and a woman anchor and this has to be your meteorologist. Give the people who are the best for the job, no matter what they look like, their race, gender, the job, and you're going to get good results regardless because of their talent, not because how they look.
That was a fun conversation. Our thanks to Jasmine, Tahisha, and Ashley for sharing their stories. As for what's next, the three of them say they would love to win an Emmy. Something tells me that's going to happen. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.